Why haven't we planned a Voyager 3 mission to explore beyond the solar system? Okay, everybody, stop. Because this question right here, is exactly the kind of thing that keeps me up at 2 in the morning with my brain running at full speed. Listen to it carefully. Next year will be the 50th anniversary of Voyager 2's launch. With everything that's changed technologically since 1977, why hasn't a Voyager 3 never been planned? It could be better in every single aspect and maybe even surpass Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 in half the time, gathering far richer data. Fantastic! This question is absolutely, completely, outrageously fantastic. And you know why? Because it sounds simple. It sounds like the question of someone who doesn't understand how NASA works. But actually, it's the question of someone who has perfectly understood how the universe works. Someone who raised their hand and said, hold on a second. We sent 2 incredible probes out there a half a century ago using Stone Age technology, and now we got tools that would make 1977 engineers' heads spin? So why the heck aren't we already out there? And then another question arrived, even crazier, even more beautiful. Why don't we send a Voyager 3 to explore the solar system vertically, on a path orthogonal to the plane of the ecliptic? People, buckle up, because today we're going really, really far. Let's take a step back. A small, wonderful step back in time, specifically to August 20th, 1977. It's a warm Florida morning at Kennedy Space Center, and from Launch Complex 41, a Titan III-E Centaur rocket lifts off carrying a 1,590-pound probe. Its name is Voyager 2. 16 days later, on September 5th, Voyager 1 will follow, curiously numbered in reverse order of launch, because its more direct trajectory would get it to Jupiter and Saturn before its twin. Now, I want you to do something. I want you to stop for a second and really think about what technology meant in 1977. The iPhone wouldn't exist for another 30 years. The personal computer was barely a thing. And the 2 most ambitious probes ever built by humankind, the ones meant to reach the very edge of the solar system, had onboard computers with a memory of 69.63 kilobytes. 69.63 kilobytes. Your smartphone has memory roughly 1 million times larger. 1 million times. And we're not talking about a Word document here. We're talking about the computers that guided 2 probes through the outer solar system, that managed all onboard systems during flybys of 4 giant planets, that still today, nearly 50 years later, are executing commands and sending data back from interstellar space. Their radio transmitters broadcast at a power of 23 watts. 23 watts, less than an old-fashioned light bulb. And with that laughably tiny power output, those signals cross billions of miles of empty space and reach our antennas here on planet Earth. If that doesn't give you chills, I honestly don't know what would. Hey Curious Squad, before moving on, answering the question, be sure to subscribe to our channel, clicking on the notification bell, and leave us a thumbs up so you don't miss out on our daily videos. Voyager 1 is today, right now, at this very moment, approximately 15 billion miles away from Earth. The radio signal it sends takes more than 22 hours to reach us, traveling at the speed of light. It is the most distant human-made object in the known universe, and it's still working, still transmitting, still sending precious data home, 50 years after launch, with 69 kilobytes of memory. Human engineering, ladies and gentlemen. Every once in a while, we really get it right. Voyager 2 is a little closer, about 12.4 billion miles, but it holds the unique distinction of being the only probe in history to have flown by all 4 giant planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. The only one. To this day, nearly 50 years after launch, no other probe has ever reached Uranus or Neptune. Not a single one. We know those planets almost entirely from Voyager 2's brief flyby, a few hours of observation from a fixed perspective, with instruments that are now half a century old. Think about that. Really think about that. 2 of the planets in our own solar system have been visited exactly once. Once, 50 years ago, by a probe with less memory than a musical greeting card. So yeah, the question writes itself. Why don't we send something better? Why not a Voyager 3? Yeah, folks, this is the answer that disappoints everyone, but it's absolutely true. because the circumstances that made the Voyager missions possible were so rare and so specific that they are essentially unrepeatable for another 120 years or so. Yes, you heard that right, 120 years. But the short answer is never enough. Let's go deeper. And I promise you, what we find down there is even more fascinating than a simple, "it can't be done." The success of the Voyager missions depended on one single fundamental cosmically ordained thing: the Grand Planetary Alignment. In 1977, and only in 1977, in that specific window of time, the four giant planets of the solar system were positioned in a configuration that allowed a single probe to visit all of them in sequence: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, one after another, like gates in a cosmic slalom course, each one usable to accelerate and steer the probe toward the next. This technique is called a gravity assist, or gravitational slingshot, and it's one of the most elegant ideas that space engineering has ever produced. The concept is beautifully simple. When a probe approaches a planet, that planet's gravity accelerates and redirects it. If the trajectory is calculated just right, the probe exits the encounter moving faster than before, and it has essentially stolen a tiny bit of orbital energy from the planet. The planet slows down by an infinitesimal amount. The probe slingshots away like a stone from a catapult. Without the Grand Alignment, this cascade technique, used Jupiter, then Saturn, then Uranus, then Neptune, would be impossible. The planets simply wouldn't be in the right place, and the amount of fuel needed to reach them without the gravitational slingshot would be so enormous as to make any such mission completely impractical with any reasonable technology. Now, the young NASA scientist Gary Flandro, a name that deserves to be written in capital letters in the history of space exploration, figured this out in 1965 while working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. He was studying possible trajectories for missions to the outer planets when he noticed something extraordinary, something almost unbelievable. Toward the late 1970s, a planetary alignment would occur that was as rare as it gets, an opportunity window that opens roughly 175 years. 175 years. The last time had been in 1801. The next will be around 2150. And Gary Flandro essentially said, "Folks, we have 12 years to build something and launch it. After that, the train leaves the station and doesn't come back for nearly 2 centuries." NASA listened. Congress opened the checkbook. The Voyagers were built, launched, and the rest, as they say, is history. Cosmic history. But now the train is left. The window is closed. And from that point on, every decade that passes is a decade in which the planets drift further from the ideal configuration. We can't repeat the trick. Not with the same elegance, the same efficiency, the same scope. Now, there's the question that really bites. Here's the interesting part. The part that deserves a serious, honest, enthusiastic answer. Yes, absolutely yes, technology has improved in staggering ways. Modern propulsion systems are vastly more efficient. Scientific instruments, spectrometers, particle detectors, magnetometers, cameras now have sensitivity and resolution that in 1977 was pure science fiction. Communications are incomparably better. Even the ability to process data on board without having to send everything raw back to Earth has changed dramatically. But, and this is a but that really matters, there is a physical limit that no technological advance can fully overcome: distance. Distance is a tyrant. Distance doesn't negotiate. Distance is not impressed by how many transistors you can pack into a microprocessor. Even with a far more powerful rocket than anything from 1977, reaching the edge of the solar system still takes decades. Not years, decades. New Horizons, launched in 2006 on the fastest trajectory ever achieved for an object heading into the outer solar system, took 9.5 years to reach Pluto. 9.5 years! And Pluto sits near the inner edge of the Kuiper Belt, still enormously far from the heliopause, that frontier where the solar winds slam into the interstellar medium that Voyager 1 crossed in 2012. Sure, with Jupiter's gravitational slingshot, which New Horizons used, you can gain a lot of speed. But without the Grand Alignment, you can't pull off the same chain reaction with all the planets in sequence. You can use Jupiter, maybe Saturn, and then you're on your own in the void, coasting on whatever speed you've built up. But, and here comes the part that literally makes my heart beat faster, there are serious, very serious, extraordinarily serious plans underway to send a modern probe to the edge of the solar system in a reasonable time frame. NASA and the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory have spent years developing the concept of an interstellar probe, a spacecraft designed specifically to push beyond the heliopause and study the interstellar medium with brand new eyes. And the most ambitious plans involve something so audacious it takes your breath away, using the sun itself as a gravitational slingshot. The idea goes like this. You fly the probe dangerously close to our star, closer than 10 solar radii, roughly 4.3 million miles, a place where temperatures run into the tens of thousands of degrees, and you exploit that colossal gravity to fling it out of the solar system at speeds that dwarf anything the Voyagers ever achieved. This is called the Solar Oberth maneuver, named after the German physicist Hermann Oberth, who first theorized its basis. If they pulled it off, a probe like this could reach Voyager 1's current distance in fewer than 15 years instead of 45. 15 years with modern instruments, with resolutions that would make the researchers who worked with the Voyagers weep with joy. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a dream. It's hard engineering, and hard engineering is exactly what the human race was built for. Talking about a Voyager 3 that follows in its predecessor's footsteps is already exciting. But the second question that came in opens up a perspective so dizzying that every time I think about it, I have to stop and take a breath. Why not send a probe to explore the solar system vertically, on a trajectory orthogonal to the plane of the ecliptic? Friends, this question is genius. Let me explain why. To understand it, you need to grasp something fundamental and magnificent about the structure of our solar system. Picture the solar system as an incredibly thin cosmic pancake. The Sun sits at the center, and all the planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, orbit around it almost perfectly on the same plane. This plane is called the ecliptic, and it's the direct inheritance of the cloud of gas and dust from which the solar system formed 4.6 billion years ago. When that enormous cloud began to collapse and spin, most of its matter flattened into a disk, exactly when you spin a ball of pizza dough and watch it get thinner and wider. The result is that almost everything we know about the solar system lies within a few degrees of this plane. It's as if all the action in the solar system happens on one single horizontal surface, while above and below there's almost nothing. Almost. And our reader's question is, what if we sent a probe to explore that almost nothing? What would we find above and below the ecliptic plane at the same distances where the Voyagers revealed such unexpected wonders? The answer, brace yourselves, is we don't know. We don't know precisely, and that not knowing, that gap in our understanding of the universe right around us, is the most exciting thing I've heard all week. Now comes the technically complicated part, but don't worry, it's complicated in a fascinating way. Sending a probe vertically relative to the ecliptic is technologically much harder than sending one along the plane. The reason is brutally simple. Our entire arsenal of gravitational slingshots, every planet we can use to accelerate a probe, sits on the ecliptic plane. When we use Jupiter to give a probe a boost, that boost is almost entirely within Jupiter's orbital plane. To deflect a probe significantly out of that plane, we need vastly greater amounts of additional propulsive energy. But, and this but is crucial, it's not impossible. The ESA and NASA have already done it on a limited scale. The Ulysses probe, launched in 1990, was the first mission specifically designed to observe the Sun from polar latitudes. To get there, it used a Jupiter flyby not to accelerate within the ecliptic plane, but to be sharply deflected toward the polar latitudes, toward the south pole of the solar system. Ulysses ended up in a highly inclined orbit around the Sun, which allowed it to fly over both poles. The results? Extraordinary. Ulysses showed us for the first time how the solar wind behaves at high latitudes, revealing that near the poles it blows in a far more uniform and faster stream than in equatorial regions. It showed us the three-dimensional structure of the solar corona. It let us measure interstellar dust penetrating the solar system from outside. It revealed aspects of the solar magnetic field we could never have seen from an equatorial perspective. But Ulysses stayed in orbit around the sun. It never headed outward into the outer solar system. It never explored that vast region of space above and below the ecliptic that stretches toward the Kuiper Belt and beyond. And that unexplored space is exactly where our reader wants to send a probe. Where I want to send a probe. Where all of us should want to send a probe. We now enter that wonderful territory that sits right on the border between the science we know and the science we're about to discover. The territory of well-grounded speculation, where great scientists live and breathe, where great discoveries are born. The heliopause, that frontier where the solar wind stops and interstellar space begins, is not a perfect sphere. The Voyager missions gave us data on just 2 points of the structure, where Voyager 1 crossed it in the sector facing the direction of the sun's motion through the galaxy, and where Voyager 2 crossed it in a slightly different direction. 2 points. 2. On a structure that wraps around the entire solar system in every direction. It's like trying to understand the shape of a basketball by touching it in only 2 spots. You'd get the general idea, but you'd miss an enormous amount of critical detail. From those 2 data points and from theoretical models, we know the heliopause is possibly asymmetric, more compressed on the side facing the interstellar headwind, more expanded on the opposite side. But what does it look like at high ecliptic latitudes? We don't know. We have never sent anything there, ever. And then there's the Oort cloud, that vast, mysterious, almost mythological spherical reservoir of comets that gives rise to the long-period comets, those that appear in our inner sky once every thousands of years and have terrified and fascinated human beings for millennia. The Oort cloud is distributed in a roughly spherical pattern around the solar system, not along the ecliptic plane. A probe heading toward high latitudes could pass through this region and finally tell us something precise about its structure and composition. And then there's the interstellar medium itself, that stuff filling the space between stars. Not absolute emptiness, but a thin broth of particles, magnetic fields, and cosmic rays. At different latitudes relative to the ecliptic, the properties of this medium could be different. Measuring them and comparing them to the Voyager data would give us a 3-dimensional picture of our solar system's boundary. Not a line, a plane. Not a 2-dimensional map, a volume. A volume that no human eye, not even an electronic one, has ever seen. Yes, the answer is absolutely, unequivocally, enthusiastically yes. And it's not just science fiction. It's serious physics and engineering being pursued by serious people in serious laboratories with serious funding. Within the studies for the Interstellar Probe mission, researchers have considered several possible trajectories, including some that diverge significantly from the ecliptic plane. The goal is to build the first 3-dimensional picture of the heliosphere, the magnetic bubble created by the solar wind that shields the solar system from the interstellar medium and makes life on this planet possible. And then there's the Solar Polar Probe concept for the outer solar system, an idea circulating among planetary scientists with growing excitement. The plan is to combine a close solar flyby with a trajectory that then blazes toward high latitudes out of the ecliptic plane at tremendous speeds. The close solar flyby, executed at precisely the right point with a propulsive burn at maximum velocity, the solar Olbers maneuver we talked about earlier, could give the probe enough acceleration to leave the solar system far faster than any previous probe in a direction no one has ever explored. The challenges are enormous. The heat shield needed to survive a few million miles from the sun is a top-tier engineering challenge, similar to what was tackled by the Parker Solar Probe in recent years. And the funding requires that long-term vision that has always been the rarest commodity in space policy. But it's doable. It is physically, engineeringly, scientifically doable. These young scientists and engineers working on interstellar probe concepts, on solar Olbers maneuver designs, on polar trajectories, they are the same intellectual bloodline as Gary Flandreau in 1965. They have the same hunger, the same brilliance, the same fire in their eyes. They're waiting for their moment, and I am convinced, deeply, irrationally, stubbornly convinced, that moment is coming. Okay guys, so what do you think? Did watching this video raise any doubts or questions? If so, it would be strange if it didn't. please feel free to let us know in the comments. And if you want to learn more, check out our full Voyager playlist. Every video we've made on the Voyager missions, their journey, and their legacy, all in one place.